They were here for a very long time, much longer than we have been. For 300,000 years, maybe more, the Neanderthals dominated Europe and Asia. They were the original inhabitants of the cold, harsh landscapes of the Ice Age. They were tough, smart, and incredibly successful. They survived brutal winters and hunted mammoths with stone-tipped spears. They were a different kind of human, but they were human. They built fires, made tools, cared for their sick, and maybe even buried their dead with purpose. And then they vanished. Around 40,000 years ago, they disappeared from the fossil record. It happened relatively quickly. In the grand scheme of things, after a reign that lasted for millennia upon millennia, they were just gone. And we, Homo sapiens, were here instead. The question of why is one of the biggest mysteries in human evolution. Why did we survive and they did not? There is no simple answer, no single culprit. It was not one event, but a slow, complicated process. It was a perfect storm of climate change, competition, and a bit of love. To understand their end, you have to understand who they were. We have this cartoon image of Neanderthals as brutish, hunched over cavemen. That picture is wrong. It is based on a single skeleton of an old arthritic Neanderthal that was reconstructed poorly over a century ago. The reality is far more interesting. Neanderthals were built for the cold, they were shorter and stockier than us. Their bodies were compact, with broad chests and short limbs. This build was great for conserving heat, like a thermos. Their noses were huge and wide. This might have helped to warm and humidify the cold, dry air they breathed. Their bones were thick and dense. They were incredibly strong, much stronger than the average modern human. They needed that strength. Their world was a tough place filled with giant cave bears, woolly rhinos, and lions. Their brains were just as large as ours, sometimes even larger. Bigger does not always mean smarter, but it tells you they were not simple creatures. Their intelligence was practical, focused on survival. They developed a sophisticated toolkit called the Mousterian industry. These were not just crude rocks. They would carefully select a stone, a piece of flint, and then skillfully chip away at it to produce a sharp flake. This flake could be a scraper for cleaning animal hides, a point for a spear, or a knife for butchering a kill. They had a whole range of tools for different jobs. It was a technology that served them well for over 200,000 years. They were expert hunters. We know this from the animal bones found at their campsites. They were not just scavenging leftovers, they were taking down prime-age animals in their peak. They hunted deer, horses, bison, and even the giants of their world, mammoths and rhinos. This was not easy. They did not have bows and arrows, they had heavy thrusting spears. To kill a mammoth, you had to get close, dangerously close. This required immense courage, but also planning and teamwork. A group of Neanderthals had to work together to isolate and kill such a large animal. This implies they could communicate and coordinate their actions. They also had a social life. They lived in small, family-based groups, and they seemed to care for each other. We have found skeletons of Neanderthals who lived for years with serious injuries. There is a famous individual from Shinidar Cave in Iraq who was blind in one eye, had a withered arm, and walked with a limp. He could not have survived on his own. His group must have fed him and protected him. This is evidence of compassion, of a social bond. They were not just a pack of animals, but a community. There is even debate about their symbolic life. Did they have art? Religion? And it's not as clear as it is with us. They did not paint grand murals on cave walls. But they did use pigments like red ochre. They may have painted their bodies. They collected eagle talons and drilled holes in shells, perhaps to wear as jewelry, and they buried their dead. Some graves seem to be simple disposals of a body, but others look more deliberate, with the body placed in a specific position. It is faint, but it is a whisper of a mind that was beginning to think about things beyond food and shelter. So these were the Neanderthals, a successful, intelligent, and adaptable species of human that had conquered the Ice Age. They were the incumbents, they had home field advantage. Then around 45,000 years ago, new people started showing up. Our ancestors, Homo sapiens, we came out of Africa. We were a different model of human. We were taller, leaner, with longer limbs. Our bodies were built for endurance, for running long distances in a warmer climate. We were not as physically powerful as the Neanderthals, but we had other advantages. When we arrived in Europe, we brought a new way of life with us. One of the most obvious differences was our technology. Our stone tools were different. We created long, thin blades from a single core of stone. This was a very efficient way to produce cutting edges. From these blades, we made a wider variety of specialized tools, spear points, knives, scrapers, and burins for carving bone and wood. But our real killer app was projectile weaponry. We invented the spear thrower, or atlatl. This was essentially a lever that allowed us to hurl a light spear with incredible force and accuracy from a safe distance. A Neanderthal had to get close to a bison, risking being gored. A modern human could stand 50 yards away and throw a spear. This was a huge advantage. It made hunting safer and more efficient. We also made tools from other materials like bone, antler, and ivory. We crafted bone needles to sew fitted clothing, which would have kept us warmer and drier. We made fish hooks and harpoons, allowing us to exploit rivers and coasts for food. Our diet was broader. Neanderthals were hypercarnivores. Their diet was heavily focused on large and medium-sized mammals. They were meat specialists. We, on the other hand, were generalists. We ate everything. Big game, yes, but also rabbits, birds, fish, shellfish, and a wide variety of plants, roots, and nuts. When the big game was scarce, we had plenty of other options on the menu. A Neanderthal group that depended on reindeer might starve if the herds moved away. A human group in the same situation would just switch to fishing and trapping rabbits. Our flexible diet made us more resilient to environmental changes, but perhaps the biggest difference was not in our tools or our food, but in our social lives. Neanderthals seemed to live in small, isolated groups. Their genetic diversity was low, suggesting their populations were small and did not mix much. Modern humans, however, lived in larger groups and had vast social networks. Artifacts made from a specific type of stone are found hundreds of miles from their source. Seashells from the coast are found deep inland. This shows that different groups were connected. They traded goods, shared information, and probably exchanged people. This network was a powerful tool. If one group was having a hard time, they could rely on neighbors for help. A new invention, like the atlatl, could spread rapidly through the network. It also meant a much larger gene pool, which is healthier for a population in the long run. These larger, interconnected groups simply had more people, more ideas, and more of a buffer against hard times. And we had something else, something that seems unique to us. We had an explosion of symbolic thought. We arrived in Europe and immediately started creating stunning art. We painted powerful images of horses, bison, and lions on cave walls. We carved intricate figurines of animals and people from ivory and bone. We made musical instruments like bone flutes. This was not just decoration. It was a way of storing and transmitting information, of building a shared culture and identity. It was a sign of a brain that was working in a new way, capable of abstract thought and complex communication. So, the stage was set, the long-reigning Neanderthals on one side, and the newly arrived, technologically advanced, and socially connected modern humans on the other. For a few thousand years, we shared Europe. We lived in the same landscapes, hunted the same animals, and sheltered in the same caves, though perhaps not at the same time. We met. We know this for a fact. And then they were gone. The simplest explanation, and the one people often jump to, is war. So, did we hunt them to extinction? Was it a prehistoric genocide, a brutal conflict where the smarter, better armed invaders wiped out the natives? It is a dramatic story, but there is very little evidence for it. We find Neanderthal skeletons with injuries, but they are usually from hunting accidents or fights with other Neanderthals. We find very few clear cases of a modern human killing a Neanderthal, or vice versa. Of course, a lack of evidence does not mean it never happened. Violence was surely a part of their world, as it was of ours. There were probably skirmishes over prime hunting grounds or a good cave, but a sustained continent-wide war seems unlikely. It probably was not that direct. The replacement was likely something more subtle. It was more of an economic competition than a military one. Imagine two tribes living in the same valley. One is a small group of Neanderthals. They are great hunters of deer. The other is a larger group of modern humans. They also hunt deer, but they use atlatls, so they are a bit more successful and take fewer risks. They also trap rabbits, catch fish from the river, and gather nuts from the forest. Over time, the human population grows, while the Neanderthal population, with its more limited food source, stays the same or shrinks. The humans put more pressure on all the resources in the valley. They are just slightly better at extracting a living from the environment. They do not need to kill the Neanderthals, they just need to be a little bit better at staying alive and having babies. Even a tiny advantage, something like a 1% higher birth rate, can make a huge difference over 1,000 years. The modern humans, with their broader diet and safer hunting techniques, probably had a lower mortality rate and a slightly higher fertility rate. We just slowly, steadily, and unintentionally squeezed them out. We were an invasive species. Like gray squirrels replacing red squirrels in Britain, the gray squirrels did not declare war on the reds. They were just better at finding food and had more offspring. Over decades, the reds just faded away. The disappearance of the Neanderthals might have been a similar story, just playing out over a few millennia. But this was all happening against a backdrop of dramatic climate change. The Ice Age was not a constant deep freeze. The climate was incredibly unstable. It would swing rapidly from cold and dry to relatively warm and wet, and then back again. These shifts could happen in the span of a few decades. For a species like the Neanderthals, who were highly specialized for a certain kind of environment and a certain kind of prey, these rapid changes would have been devastating. A cold snap could cause the forest to retreat and be replaced by open steppe. The red deer the Neanderthals were used to hunting might disappear, replaced by reindeer or bison. Neanderthals would have to adapt their hunting strategies and their whole way of life. They had done this successfully for hundreds of thousands of years, but now they had to do it while also competing with a new, highly adaptable human species that was already good at hunting in open country. The climate instability put them under immense stress, and just when they were at their most vulnerable, we were there, taking up space and resources. So we have competition in climate change, but there is a third crucial piece to this puzzle, and it is the one that has only come to light in the last decade or so. It comes not from stones and bones, but from DNA. Scientists have learned how to extract and read the ancient DNA from Neanderthal fossils. And when they compared the Neanderthal genome to ours, they made a stunning discovery. Most modern humans whose ancestry is from outside of Africa have about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. What this means is that we did not just replace them, we interbred with them. When we had children together, the Neanderthals did not vanish without a trace. A small part of them lives on inside of us. This changes the entire story. It was not a simple case of us versus them. The lines were blurry. It suggests that on at least some occasions, when our ancestors met Neanderthals, they saw them as people, as partners. We do not know the social context of this interbreeding. Was it peaceful and consensual? Were individuals adopted into each other's groups, or was it the violent result of conflict? It was probably all of the above, happening at different times and in different places. But the overall pattern is what is important. The flow of genes seems to have been mostly one way from Neanderthals into the much larger modern human population. This adds weight to the idea that we simply overwhelmed them with our numbers. Imagine a small, struggling Neanderthal group encountering a large, thriving group of modern humans. It might have made sense for the Neanderthals to merge with the human group. It would be a way to survive. Over generations, their unique physical features and culture would disappear into the larger gene pool, but their lineage would continue. This process is called assimilation. In this view, the Neanderthals did not go extinct in the traditional sense. They were absorbed. Their population was so small compared to the incoming wave of modern humans that they were eventually just genetically swamped. They became a river flowing into a massive ocean. The river disappears, but its water becomes part of the ocean. So, what really happened to the Neanderthals? The truth is likely a mix of all these things. There was no single cause of their demise. It was a complex and drawn-out process. Let's try to paint a plausible picture. It is 42,000 years ago in what is now France. A clan of Neanderthals is living in a river valley. They have been here for generations. But things are getting harder. The climate is shifting again. It is getting colder, and the herds of horses they depend on are becoming less predictable. Their population is small, maybe only 20 or 30 individuals. Then, a new group of people moves into the valley. They are taller, leaner. They carry strange new weapons. They are Homo sapiens. They are numerous, maybe 100 of them. They hunt the same horses, but they also fish in the river and set traps for foxes. They seem to be thriving. There is probably some tension, some conflict over the best hunting spots. But there is no war. The Neanderthals are just being outcompeted. For every horse a Neanderthal hunting party brings back, the humans bring back a horse, plus a net full of fish, and a few rabbits. Their population grows. The Neanderthal population, under pressure from the climate and the new competition, begins to shrink. An unlucky hunting accident kills one of their best hunters. A harsh winter claims an elder and a child. Maybe a young Neanderthal female, seeing the success of the other group and the decline of her own, leaves her family and joins the humans. She has children with a human male. Her children are raised as modern humans, learning their language and their ways. They carry her Neanderthal DNA with them, repeat this story across Europe over 200 generations. Small, isolated Neanderthal groups find themselves increasingly stressed by a changing climate. and everywhere they turn, they encounter larger, better connected, and more adaptable groups of modern humans. Some Neanderthal groups retreat to refuges, like the Iberian Peninsula, holding on for a few thousand years longer. Others just slowly fade away, their numbers dwindling until they are no longer viable. And some are absorbed, their genes flowing into the human river. There was no final battle. There was no single moment of extinction. It was a slow fade, a demographic process playing out over thousands of years. They were undone by a series of small disadvantages that compounded over time. Their specialized diet, their small social groups, their less efficient technology, and perhaps a bit of bad luck with the climate. We were not necessarily better or smarter in some absolute sense. We were just better adapted for the specific challenges of that time and place. Our generalist, networked approach to life proved to be more successful in an unstable world than their specialist, isolated approach. The story of the Neanderthals is a profound and slightly sad one. It is a reminder that being successful for 300,000 years is no guarantee of survival. Evolution is not a ladder leading inevitably to us. It is a branching tree, and many successful branches have been pruned. The Neanderthals were one such branch. They were a different version of humanity, a different answer to the question of how to be human. Their world ended, and ours began. But they are not entirely gone. We carry their ghosts in ourselves. Their legacy is written into our own DNA, a permanent echo of the other humans who once shared this planet with us.